You know, when you work doing what we do and putting on lots of events and running a magazine, of course, one of the key components to that is finding sponsorship. And when 2 years ago we came across Reto Leder, who is the CEO of Trafo Baden, the Swiss events village, we were delighted that he just got what it was that we were doing and was very keen to become a sponsor. But that isn't the end of the story. Reto has become a really dear friend and an advocate for the profession. And we went back in November and spent time at Trafo Baden because he was particularly keen to show us exactly what he was talking about in terms of customer service. And this year, when we sat down to work out what his sponsorship looked like, I was blown away by the fact that he didn't want to be a sponsor in the way that so many others did. He really wanted to add value to the profession. And to that end, he wanted me to interview him on his knowledge about organising events, to set up a training course for assistants, to show them how they could achieve events excellence. And he really wanted to add value when you decided that you wanted to use them as a venue. You know as well as I do that to have somebody at a venue when you're working with them who really gets into a zone of thinking, how can I make this event absolutely exceptional and work with the client to get them to achieve exactly what it is that they want? That's a miracle. That doesn't happen very often. So I was delighted that we were able to sit down and we were able to do this interview, which I think will be unlike any other sponsor interview that you have ever seen, because I think he barely mentioned sponsorship. It was so interesting to find out about his life, to find out about why it is that he is so passionate about customer service, and to find out what he thinks, having spent a year in the marketplace, about all of you and how he can support. So will you please join me in welcoming our headline sponsor for this year, but also now my dear friend, Reto Leder. Reto, how wonderful to see you. I'm so looking forward to talking to you today about all the things that have been going on in the events industry, because obviously there's been a huge shift over COVID. But what I wanted to do before we did any of that was to just ask you a bit about yourself. So can you talk to us a little bit about Reto and your career and how you got into working in events in the first place?
Absolutely. Well, thank you first for having me. It's great to have this chat with you. Well, regarding your question, I've really spent all my professional life in the hospitality industry ever since I got out of school 40 years ago or so. I went into hospitality, be that restaurant business. I've done some kitchen work, not very successful, I have to say. I can't cook. All the way up to where I'm now in managing a convention center. So in between, so much has happened. I've worked at an airline catering in Argentina. I've worked for a Swiss hotel management school, opening up new markets. I've worked on a couple of cruise ships, which I have to say was probably the best job I've ever had. And so, hospitality is in my blood, I suppose. We have a lot of people in our family who used to have restaurants or hotels. And so there was never really a question I want to go into that, because I've always been fascinated by the concept of service, right?
Very definitely. And you mentioned cruise ships. I know that one of the places you worked was the QE2, and your stories from that time are absolutely legendary. So I just wondered what you felt you had learnt, particularly from your time working on that cruise ship.
Well, I worked on 2 cruise ships. I started off on the QE2 on the World Cruise back then. And I worked for a specific project that QNOT had started just shortly before. It was called the College at Sea. And you have to imagine that on a cruise ship, staffing is always very, just what you need. You don't really have the capacity to carry extra crew members just in case someone gets sick and so on. And so in order to solve that, QNOT has come up with this College at Sea idea, where we essentially set up a training center on board the QE2. And for, I believe, it was 6 or 8 weeks, we would take on a group of 15, 20 people, give them the full training while at sea, insert them into the actual work environment and test them at the same time. So whenever there was somebody who wouldn't really, they didn't feel like cruising was for them, we would realize that before they actually got a fixed contract. And so at the end of it, we knew who to hire and give them a full contract. And that was a brilliant concept, I have to say. It was a lot of fun, meeting all these people. And, cruise ships, they're just, I think, the most extreme version of a hotel when it comes to service, right? Because first of all, you have your guests there 24/7. They can't go anywhere really because there's water all around you. And so you have to do a lot more to keep them happy. You really the famous phrase, like going the extra mile and being a step ahead of your customers and everything. That is so true on cruise ships, much more than for hotels that are land-based, because it's constantly about wowing people. And I went to Seabourn after that, the Seabourn cruise line, and they have even perfected that concept more. So we would have every week staff meetings where the sole purpose was to find out how can we wow people on the next cruise? Like, who are these people? Have they cruised with us before, and so on? And so many fantastic ideas have come up from those meetings. And it just helped us achieve highest ratings on each cruise again and again. And it's because you had a fantastic group of people working with you, lots of ideas, lots of talent that was out there that you just had to really grasp. And what was true for the guests was true for the crew as well. They couldn't go anywhere either. So, of course, we were all stuck on the same boat, and everybody just did their very, very best to give our guests the utmost cruising experience. And I think that is what's also, once I left the cruise industry, really helped me to keep a very clear focus on that guest experience. And what is true on a cruise ship is especially true so in an event, because at the end of the day, we talk to one person who organizes an event or a meeting for up to 400, 500 more people. And it's not just about pleasing one guest, it's about pleasing the 500. And that makes it ever so much more challenging and interesting.
Yes, and I know you're almost obsessive about that detail and making sure that the customer service is right. And I know that when we have spoken about things that you're doing at Trafo, there are so many examples of just tiny things that maybe other people aren't doing. And I would love you to talk to me a little bit about why you feel that customer service piece is so important and why you're so obsessed with it.
Why am I obsessed with it? Well, I can't get out of my system, I suppose. That's the simple answer. But I mean, at the end of the day, we all want to we want to sell something. So in our case, we want to sell an event experience at Trafo, catering service, and so on and so forth. And the best way to make sure that people come back is, again, to wow them. And the more you look after the details, the more you do things that people don't necessarily expect, of course, the better overall impression you leave. I mean, I'm sure you've heard the famous phrase that it's the first impression that makes the difference. And while I agree with that in principle, I think the second and third impressions are just as important, because at the end of the day, a guest, no matter in which environment, will take home with her or him a series of impressions that make up the whole package. And based on that, he or she will decide, will I ever go back to that place or not? And so we cannot just rely on making a first impression, then let it slide. So we really have to think the whole process through, from the very first customer contact to the day the last event guest leaves, and make sure that all these steps are really, each one is a single experience of its own. And again, you need a great staff for that, of course, a great team. And the more that you can instill in them the need for excellence, the need for service excellence, I think the better chance you have that you actually get that whole package delivered as it's supposed to be.
And that, of course, is transferable to the assistants, because I think so often the assistants don't know what excellence looks like, and they don't get training, and therefore there isn't that reach for the stars. That's the level that you've got to get to. And I think it's so interesting, because businesses would really learn from that.
Well, so, I talked to many. Sorry, I talked to many assistants, obviously, because they're the main group of customers that we have at the convention center. And what I hear most is that one of their biggest challenge really is that every time they go to a new location, it's like back to field one. Because especially when we don't just talk about a meeting where you essentially book a seminar room for 10, 15, 20 people, and all you need is a projector and a couple of coffees and so on. If we really go into larger events, then obviously each event location, each convention center is so very different from the other one that you cannot just copy paste. That's just not possible, because you may have the same event idea, but the physical layout of the property may be completely different. The distribution of rooms may be different. Catering is different. Everything is different. And so it's this need to be able to, for assistants, this need to be able to really find themselves again in this new environment and deliver the same cool event experience that they did before is really only possible if you have a group of people you can count on that know the place better than you do.
Very definitely. We'll come on to talk more about that in a little while, but I want to talk about COVID for a little moment.
Okay.
And obviously that had a huge impact on the events industry for almost 2 years, and now they're saying it's getting back to normal. But
what is normal again?
Exactly. Talk to us about what you've seen, and talk to us about what it's looking like now you're emerging from the other side, in theory.
Well, while I do agree that COVID has an impact, or has had an impact, because it is really mostly gone. We only have very few cases where events don't take place because of fear of a COVID research. So, but I have to say, I've been in the specific event business now for the last 10 years plus, and the event industry has always changed and reinvented itself. I think it's wrong to say that everything that, that has changed today is because of COVID, because it's simply not true. I mean, while at the same time, it's not true that virtual and hybrid events have only existed since COVID. I mean, we've done live streams for the last 10 plus years. Okay, it has always been there. It's never been called a hybrid event. It has been called a live stream. But it's the same thing. Same for virtual events. Like everybody talks about Zoom and Teams now. We've had Skype for what, 25 years? And Skype has been an important part of our lives for, a quarter of a century. So I really think we have to put things a bit into perspective about really what is it that has changed. And for me personally, events are a mirror of the needs of society in terms of how they want to communicate, the things they want to talk about and so on. Like, I remember in Switzerland, like, what was it, 20 years ago or even more, 25 years ago, when Nokia brought out a new cell phone, they would do a mega event that would probably cost them a couple of million just to introduce a new cell phone. It was like, wow, all of Switzerland was like a new Nokia. How cool is that? Nowadays, you have a new cell phone like every 10 minutes coming out. And so there's it's not important anymore. We have, we see a trend towards people wanting to do events again in venues that have a lot of daylight, because they're tired of sitting in a dark room and listening to dark news sometimes. So they want to have daylight. We see a trend that people want to do more collaborative event formats. So rather than sitting in an audience, like theater style, and you get PowerPoint presentations thrown at you all day long from different people, that's just not what the world wants today. So people, they want to do things like a World Cafe. Maybe you've heard of that format, where people go around different workstations, exchange ideas, and then bring them back together again. People want to participate and really bring in their own ideas and thoughts into the conversation, rather than just listening to a person and go home again. And so event formats have always changed. I think our biggest challenge today really is to try to foresee what the next change will be. And as new ideas come up and as new innovations come into the market, companies will come up with new event formats, and it's our job to make sure that they can execute those ideas in the most successful way possible. But it's a challenging and very interesting time. This is, I mean, the world will never stop inventing itself. And as I said, events are just a way to test grounds.
I think it's so interesting what you're saying, because, what I saw over COVID was that obviously event directors had to get creative, and the way that events were done online changed exponentially. And it was just extraordinary watching over a 2-year period how much the technology improved. However, anybody that thought live events were going away was really wrong about that. It just meant that there was an alternative. So, we, for example, are doing online events like this, but we've very definitely gone back to doing the live events. And it's just a preference of the people at the time, I think, as to what they want out of an event. But I love what you're saying about events being a playground to try new things. Do you think that COVID has impacted businesses' ability to try new things?
I think that companies were forced to try new things more so than before, because COVID has impacted the economy at large. So many also smaller companies who have almost gone out of business. And so, of course, they're trying to reconnect with their customer base. They're trying to reconnect with everybody. I mean, just as an example, we've had over the last 2 months, we've had a incredible number of inquiries of larger companies in Switzerland who want to do larger staff events again. Why? Because they haven't seen each other.
Yes. And, I'm really interested on your opinion on hybrid meetings as well, because for me, being absolutely honest, I love the idea of hybrid meetings when they're done right, but goodness, they're expensive.
Very true. I mean, we've analyzed that early on during COVID, when the first lockdown hit us. We have an in-house AV partner as well, and so we've analyzed, or we've created scenarios, is a better way to say it, where we said, okay, so if you take event X and we transform it into a hybrid event, how much more or less will it cost just to get the live streaming really well done, so you have a stable connection, everything. And fact was, it was a factor 1.5 to 2 of the cost of doing it just physically, because it's just not realistic to think, well, if I only have 50 people on site rather than 500, I pay less catering. That is true, but AV costs is just usually so high that it not only is more expensive than the catering that you don't pay, it gets much more expensive than that. Keeping people really online, keeping them engaged, it is so difficult. And a lot of people here in Switzerland have said, well, the advantage of going hybrid is that you can entertain the people online in the same way. You have to do completely different things to keep people at bay online and on site. So what I think is really going to happen with hybrid events is one format that I think really has a future is decentralized events, which is a form of hybrid. So say you do one event of your, let's say, modern day assistants, you do them in Barcelona, and you do one in Berlin, and you do one in Zurich, all at the same time, connected via a specific software that allows you to connect everybody. So everybody is physically in the event location, but you're all connected over the internet as well, so you can talk to each other. And that is a very interesting form of doing hybrid events. I think associations are more and more starting to use that type of dynamic.
Very definitely. I love that. I love that idea of formats and different formats. Are there any other things that you're seeing coming out of COVID that have really impacted events, particularly in terms of formats?
Well, there's the eternal discussion of virtual, not just hybrid, but actually getting an event completely online. Everybody talks about the metaverse and so on and so forth. So I think it's just too early to say what really the potential of these type of formats will be in the future, because it's all so new and a lot of is experimenting still. I think the generations that are not so online, compatible are still in the majority, rather than with the young ones who are very much accustomed to just being online. So I do think it will take a bit more time to really figure out how that will impact our world here.
Yeah, to shake down, I guess. So, okay, let's talk about Trafo a little bit, because obviously you run this hugely successful convention centre in Switzerland, near to Zurich, called Trafo. It's in a tiny town called Baden, just outside of Zurich. And obviously you're our headline sponsor for this year, which we're very grateful for. Thank you very much. But what does a convention centre from Switzerland have to do with you needing to talk to assistants?
Excellent question. Obviously, we have talked about this at length, about why would it be interesting for us to be a headline sponsor for the events of executive support. I think it all comes down to, you do training and we have something that we can help train people about, and that's event organization. So we do 500 events every year, all sizes, from meeting of 2 people to big events of 1,500, 2,000 guests and so on. So we have a huge knowledge among our team of how you best prepare for a meeting or for an event, all the different checklists you should have at hand, just to make sure you don't forget any important detail, while at the same time you, as the one who organizes the event, being able to go into the day of the event without being completely stressed out. And so this is essentially what we hope we can contribute to your learning platform, is how do we best go about planning an event. And it starts at coming up with an idea. Why do I want to do the event? What is the goal of the event? Who do I want to talk to at the event? And so on. And so out of that, you develop the whole process of planning it all the way up to the day of the event, the debriefing afterwards and everything. So just to make sure that you really have all the tools necessary and available to make sure that you have the best guest experience possible.
Amazing. Can you give us more of an idea about exactly what they can expect from that training program?
Well, we've taken the entire event planning process and split it up into different phases. So we're talking about 4 or 5 different phases that make up the entire process, and we will go phase by phase, dissect it, as much as possible, and highlight all those specific areas where event planners really should focus on more. Some things are a bit more important, others are less. A lot of things people don't even think about that they could happen. And these are the things that, at the end of the day, the team that looks after you from the convention center really must alert you to, because if you have never organized an event, there's some things you just can't know. And so it is this communication between the 2 parties that really make the difference. So what we want to teach in these sessions that are coming up is, for instance, all the things that you need to have a third party for. Okay, so let's say, do you have security? Do you have medical assistance? It's not the same in every country. Some of them require it, others don't. AV, decoration, entertainment. What else? Catering, of course, is a big part of it. So you get all these things together, put them on the checklist, and really go one by one until you have a ticked box in every case. You can say doesn't apply or I've done it. One of those 2 things need to happen.
And you're doing these as a complimentary gift to our audience, aren't you? Which is, I think, is absolutely amazing.
Well, I mean, we don't need to talk about everything that's available at Trafo. People can go on a website and look at it for themselves. So that will happen in due time. So really, what's in our best interest is to really get all that knowledge that we have in-house together, some partners from outside of Trafo as well, and put it into a format that is easy to understand, easy to reproduce as a guideline, as a checklist, as I said. So hopefully your community's life will be a bit easier in the future, especially those who haven't had a lot of experience in organizing events.
And
because
actually,
it's a fantastic communication tool.
Yes, absolutely. But I have to say, you know, Reto, I have been in events for 35 years, and every time I talk to you, I learn things. So I know that they will learn enormous amount from you. The other thing, you know, that the other thing I'm really interested in is, obviously, Switzerland is a very beautiful country, and you know, you have this wonderful convention centre there. But why do you want to market it internationally? Because I know that you're almost sold out the whole time. It's, you know, and let's face it, Switzerland can be expensive.
It can be on the pricier side of life, absolutely, and that's obviously one thing I hear a lot when I travel around and talk to people about, you know, where do you do events internationally and so on. And every time I say, well, Switzerland, oh, too expensive, we can't do that. And so that's only half the truth. I think first you have to know that if you want to do an event in Switzerland, and I hear that especially from associations, more so than maybe from corporations. But with associations, I've heard that argument a lot, that they say, you know, most delegates from our member countries, they probably couldn't afford Switzerland for a private holiday if they had to pay everything by themselves. So if they have a chance to go to Switzerland as a delegate, and they have at least some of their travel expenses paid for by the local association or whichever sponsor takes care of that, then this is like a bonus, like a Christmas present. Because we've had such an event here a couple of years ago, an international association. They came here in July for 2 weeks, 120 people, and quite some of them towards the end of their stay in here in Baden, they would have their wives or partners come over again, and then, you know, stay a couple of days on and enjoy Switzerland. And so I think that's a very interesting way to look at things. It's a safe country. You know, how expensive is safety? So if you can just arrive at Zurich airport, take the next train, you know it will leave, and most likely on time. So 99% of the trains leave on time in Switzerland. So and you get from A to B in a safe way, in a comfortable way. We don't have any security issues here in this country, and I think that's a big plus for a country like us, small country like us, which has to deal with this perception that we're too expensive. But mind you, I go to London a lot, and you know, I'm not sure which one's more expensive. Is it London or Switzerland? So we can talk about that later on. But it's distances are very short. You know, we have the 4 or 5 major cities: Geneva, Zurich, Bern, Basel, and Lucerne. They're all connected within an hour or 2 max by train. Highways are very effective and very fast to reach, and so on. So you have all these arguments in favor, plus obviously the chocolates. And, you know,
oh, well, the chocolate is definitely up there.
And the cheese. So, yeah, I think it's you have to look at the big picture when you plan an event. Okay. Obviously, Switzerland, we don't have cities where you, like Madrid or Barcelona, where you have a hotel capacity that you know, far outpaces anything we have in Switzerland. So obviously, size is an issue in terms of how big an event can actually place in Switzerland. How early on can I book hotel rooms before the event happens, and so on. So there's a lot of things to talk about or think about, but when you look at the big picture, you will see that there's so many advantages doing an event here, simply because, and I think that is on every people's mind in these days, especially with you know, this terrible war raging, you know, in front of our door, essentially, is you know, to give people a feeling of safety. I think that is one of the biggest issues. Yeah,
I couldn't agree more. And the other thing that I think is that, for me anyway, the transparency is huge when we work with you. I mean, we've just booked a modern day assistant with you in October, which we're going to be delivering at Baden, which I'm very excited about, and actually would be a very good opportunity, I think, for assistants to come and to see the venue. But what I'm loving about that is that, whereas particularly in America, I quite often find myself in a situation where it's almost like the venues are going, how can we catch you out, and then present you with a bill at the end of it of things you didn't expect. Your system does completely the reverse, and I know exactly where I stand. And I'd love for you to talk to us just a little bit about that, because it's rare.
Sure. I really have to go back to the cruise ship. This is something that on Seaborn especially, they have always cherished that. They say, if you want to take a cruise, this is how much it costs. Gratuities included, no questions asked. Some shore excursions maybe are on top of it, but that's up to everybody. But most everything was in a very, very easy to understand package. And I think this is how things should be. People want transparency when it comes about prices, and especially when you talk about events that cost many tens of thousands of euros or dollars. And so we took a clue from that cruise ship experience. We took a clue from what you in England and many other countries know as a daily delegate rate. We didn't know that in Switzerland. We had that in hotels, maybe not in convention centers. So the usual format here would be that you pay a rather steep sum of money just to get the venue secured. You haven't had a single coffee for that money. And then on top of it comes every piece of furniture, every coffee, every this, every that. And at the end of the day, you get a price quote, 15, 20 pages long, while really all you're interested in is look at the bottom line, see this is the total amount, how much does it cost per delegate that is attending. And so we thought, well, how can we make life easier for people? And so we came up with a system that's not unlike when you go online and shop for a new software of some sorts, where you have, the options A, B, C with a description of what each component is, and a little check if it's included in A, B, or C or not, and the price tag at the bottom. And so it's essentially the same that we try to do. That we say to people, go online, have a look at our packages, choose the one that you think fits your event experience most, take that price, multiply the number of people you want to come with, and that is your price quote, essentially. There are a couple of things not included, like alcoholic beverages. Again, either you buy a package or you go by as you consume it. AV is an issue, of course, because that is so different for every event. We couldn't possibly make packages that suit every event, but that is just the philosophy, and I think that's something that you as the person who organizes the event has a certain power with the location you want to go to as well, because you can demand more transparency in the pricing. And the more people do that, I think the more our industry will realize that it's not about charging every little thing extra on top, and at the end you just, it's annoying. I've been on the other side as well, on the receiving side. I've organized events, and I've always had trouble thinking, why didn't nobody tell me before that this and this and this is going to cost so and so much more? So at the end of the day, you have 20-30% more cost than you had budgeted. And who's going to explain this to your boss?
Well, totally, because particularly the assistants are sitting, they're working out the budget, they're getting the sign off for the budget based on what they've been quoted. And so I do wish more event organisers, most venues would think the way that you do, because it would make everybody's life easier. And I have to say, the other thing that I think would make the event organisers' life easier is if other event venues were working like you do to make sure that the event is exactly what the organizer is wanting, because I know that what you're really great at is listening to what the final result is meant to be, and then taking that and making that a reality. Because for an assistant, particularly, who's really, really busy, having a venue that goes, okay, I get it, and I'm going to work with you to deliver what your exec needs, is huge. Can you talk to us a bit more about that and how you go about that?
Right. So I think COVID has had a major impact on that specific issue. See, when I look back at 2019 and our customer database we had back then, and we do have a lot of repeat customers, about 80% of those people working at those companies organizing events with us, they're not there anymore. They have gone. I mean, we've had an amazing, not to say terrible, turnover of staff during and after COVID. Imagine or think of all the knowledge and talent that gets lost in such a situation. And of course, that happened on the customer side as well. So listening has never been more important than now, because we have a brand new group of people talking to us. A lot of them don't know the events that have happened before. We don't know them personally. We don't have a relationship with them yet because they just started. They do their first events again, mind you, in Switzerland until February 2022. We were essentially, not allowed to do events. And so everybody is catching up now. And the catching up is not just in doing the event, but also learning in how to do them. And so we do spend, I would say, 2, if not 3 times the time with each customer to really figure out what it is they want. New ideas are coming in because they're new people, but also just, listening. What do you want to achieve and how can we assist you better in achieving that? Because we all have the same goal. We want the perfect event experience for our guests.
And it's a real differentiator, a huge differentiator.
I think it is, yes.
Yes. So thank you very much for everything that you shared with us today. I think it's going to be really useful. And I know that they're really going to be looking forward to your classes. So we'll make sure that they all get information on that. But what I wanted you to do was to leave them with the top 3 things that you think that they need as advice about working with a venue. What would they be?
That's a tricky one. Top 3. I'll go with really demand transparency. Don't let anybody fool you. I mean, convention centers, venues, they know what they have, what they don't have. They know their partners, third-party suppliers and everything. They know, what they offer, what they don't offer. So really just expect and demand transparency in everything, in a price quote, in pricing strategy and everything, just so, you have peace of mind. Then I would certainly say, use checklists. There's nothing like checklists. And while they may seem, boring and everything, I tell our people the same thing, again and again, use checklists, because the only way to make sure you don't forget something is a checklist. I mean, every pilot who flies a plane has a checklist to go through, even though they have thousands of hours flying around. They still want to make sure they don't forget anything. And I think it's the same attitude that we should adopt when approaching the organization of events. And you said 3 things, right? What's number 3? Try not to get stressed out. Things are so much easier when you take a step back, look at it again. If you see an obstacle, you say, there's something about this event that I haven't, I can't get my head around it. Take a step back, talk to somebody else, talk to the people at the venue, and really, again, expect them to help you out, because that is essentially our job. Because we know our venue, we know what is possible and what is not possible. And so, use us as a sparring partner.
Reto, it's been a joy. It's always a joy to talk to you, but I'm so pleased
Likewise,
to be able to introduce you to our audience. And I know that over the next year, when you're our headline sponsor, it's going to be valuable to them in terms of what you have provided in terms of financial support, because it allows us to put on amazing events. But also, we can't wait for the training that you're going to give, because we know it's really, really going to support them. So thank you so much for all your support.
We look forward to that. Thank you for the opportunity.
Fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. Talk to you soon.